Oh, hi, I'm Laurie Savran.
And I'm Rob Hahn. I'll be asking the questions. Today is Thursday, January 10th, 2019, and we are filming this interview in Edina, Minnesota. Let's start with the basics. What are your first memories of coming to Dinkytown in the early 60s?
Well, I remember very clearly coming to Dinkytown for the first time to buy my books at Perrine's bookstore for my college classes, and just walking around Dinkytown at that time and going to Bridgman's because I loved ice cream. Well, I still do. And just enjoying the scene.
How would you describe the scene?
It was like a little town. That's why they call it Dinkytown, I guess. It was just like a little village, you know, maybe like in Europe or something like that. It was very unique and quaint, and there were no chain, well, I don't think there were chain restaurants that much anyway at that time, but it was all individual, independent type of businesses.
Had you been anywhere previously in your life that would have compared to Dinkytown, or was this something brand new?
I don't think so, because I was only 18 years old at the time, so I don't remember anything like that.
Let's go through some of the hangouts, the stores, the businesses, and tell me your memories of them. You mentioned Perrine's. What was that like?
Well, you could buy your books there, and they had used books, which, of course, I was not wealthy, so I wanted to buy used books. And also there was another bookstore, McCosh's, which I'm sure everybody's talking about. And Mr. Melvin McCosh was quite a character. And I've had lots of connection with him over the years because later I was in the book business.
Tell me more about him. Give me a snapshot of what you observed and how you interacted with him.
Well, he was the kind of guy that kind of looked at you and really assessed you and knew kind of books you might like. He just was very intuitive about things like that. And the store was seemed like it was totally in disarray, but if you asked for a specific book, he knew exactly where it was. He'd go to the shelf and sure enough, he'd have it.
Walking, talking Phil Holland. When did you first encounter him and what was your reaction to it?
Ironically, the very first day that I went to Dinkytown, I saw Phil Holland walking around. And he was a very unique looking guy. He was a little bit scary looking to me. An 18-year-old from St. Louis Park, Minnesota. And so I thought, well, who's that? You know, and then it was like every time I went to Dinkytown, it seemed like I'd see him. It was just uncanny, you know.
Describe how he looked, because I understand he had a certain flair to him.
Well, he was kind of a big guy. He had kind of a large face. And he always seemed like he was in another world. You know, he just seemed like he was thinking about things that we had never even conceived of. You know, I never really talked to him. I was, as I said, I was a little bit scared of him or in awe of him, one of the two.
Tell me more about your experience then and throughout your life dining at Elle's Breakfast.
Well, at that time, it was really fun to eat at Elle's Breakfast. You had to wait in line, and there were, I forgot how many stools. And the food was always really good. I mean, it was just special to go to Elle's Breakfast. Later on, I still go to Elle's Breakfast, and I decided, since I'm in my 70s already, I'm going to go as often as I can when I can still sit at a stool. Because a few years ago, a friend and I went there, and she couldn't sit at the stool. She was just not flexible enough.
Let's switch gears a little and talk about kind of the social and political culture of Dinkytown. How would you describe it during your college years and shortly thereafter?
Well, during my college years, we were just starting to protest and march in the streets. And later on, of course, with the Vietnam War in full swing, I was in Dinkytown more times for protests, the Red Barn protest, for example, which was not about the war, but it was about not building businesses in Dinkytown that were not in the image of a Dinkytown.
Yeah. Let's go back. I'll re-ask you the question. Just tell me your memories of the social and political climate when you were a student, and then later after you graduated. How would you describe that social and political climate of Dinkytown?
Well, the social and political climate that I was involved in was very alternative, which was great because I had gone to St. Louis Park High School, which was a really good school, very academically up there. But there wasn't a lot of social and political types of things. And so when I got to college, I kind of became more myself and found my people who were more left-wing and radical and literate and that type of thing. And I don't remember really any protests during the years I went to college, 62 to 66. We called it the U, maybe they still do. But later on, I was still involved in social and political types of actions, and I remember protesting in Dinkytown and going to the Red Barn protest and various other events that were more on the left-wing spectrum.
Were you part of the protest of the ROTC building after the Kent State killings?
No, I was a young mother at that time, so I felt like I had to stay home.
What was it, in your estimation, about the culture, the people of Dinkytown, that lent itself to activists, being protesters?
Well, I think it was people who were looking for a new way to be in the world. And we were hippies, you know, so actually it was more, to me, a hippie movement. And it did involve, you know, smoking marijuana and eating foods that we had never heard of before. You know, like in Dinkytown had a lot of foods from other countries that we just didn't have in St. Louis Park, and at the time, now they do. And it involved reading books that our parents had never read and being impacted by that.
All right, let's revisit kind of the bookstore theme and tell me about your relationship with Marly Rusoff.
Well, I knew Marly and her sister Tammy Rusoff from Sunday school, from when we were in grade school, actually. And when I got to the U, Marly and I became friends. We hung out together, and she had wanted to work at Savran's bookstore. And at that time, I was married to the owner, Bill Savran, and I worked there myself. And so I introduced the two of them, and they both really wanted to work together. So Bill hired Marly, and she worked on the West Bank at the Savran's paperback shop. It was called on 3rd and Cedar. And then she had the idea that she wanted to start her own bookstore with Bill, and they found a location in Dinkytown right next to the Varsity Theater. Originally, it was called Savran Rusoff Bookstore, and it was a small bookstore focused on Marly's interests, a lot of which was literature and poetry. And later, she decided she would try it on her own, and so she became just Rusoff Bookstore, and at that place is where the Loft was conceived of with Marly and Phoebe Hansen. And that's when they first started having writing classes, poetry readings, and that type of thing.
Who's Phoebe Hansen? That name rings a bell.
Phoebe Hansen was a writer and a poet who died a couple years ago. She was probably a mentor to Marly because she was older.
I want to address a little bit about the organization Preserve Historic Dinkytown, its efforts and success in getting certain areas declared a historic district. What does that mean to you? Your involvement, your feelings about it, the historic element of it?
Well, I could see that developers were creeping into Dinkytown and changing the whole look of Dinkytown, and I was very unhappy about that because I loved Dinkytown the way it was, and I like, even though some of the buildings may not be of historical preservation interest, just the idea of keeping old buildings and having a place that's kind of charming and unique rather than looks like every other place in the world, you know, with Target and Walgreens and all that type of thing. I really liked the original Dinkytown and the way that connected to my soul.
I know Kristen really spearheaded the effort to get the historic designation, but what was your feeling when you finally achieved that as an organization?
Well, I was at the City Hall when that happened at the council meeting, and I was very happy. I mean, it wasn't everything we had asked for, but it was enough so that we feel that we had a success.
You had a sorority story you were going to tell me.
Oh, it's kind of a sad story, but even though I was really alternative, I had this kind of feeling that maybe I should become more successful as a regular type person, whatever that means. So I decided to pledge a sorority called SDT, Sigma Delta Tau. And it was a really bad decision, and obviously I didn't fit in because they blackballed me. And I felt really sad about that. But, you know, if that had happened, if I'd gotten into the sorority, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you, because I'd be a housewife in Minnetonka.
One question I like to ask people, especially those who experienced Dinkytown at what I'd call its pinnacle and are aware of what it is today. What has Dinkytown lost over the years?
Well, the most important thing that it lost, in my mind, is a scholar, but that was a long time ago. One of the things I wanted to tell you is that I was friends with the original owner of the Scholar, Clark Batho. My friendship came later when I was in a coffee group at Dunn Brothers, and he was a member of that coffee group. And he never really liked to talk about his time at the Scholar very much, but I was really impressed to know that he was the guy that put that all together and had hired Bob Dylan to sing and all that type of thing.
Anything else in your estimation that's really been lost over the last 10 years, maybe 3 decades, 2 decades? Not just maybe a place, but a feel?
Well, now when you go to Dinkytown, there still is kind of that feeling. You feel like it's a marginal place, like it's not the usual mall or whatever. But there's still, you know, when you look around just a block away, you see these tall, brand new buildings, you know, that don't fit into the character of the original Dinkytown.
When you look back at your time in Dinkytown as a student and then those years immediately following, what impact did that time have on your life?
Well, it totally reframed or framed who I am today as a person who is really working for social justice and hoping that the world will become a better place based on the values that I learned about when I was a student and later on in the book business. The type of values that it seems like this country is being polarized by.
Tell us about Marv.
I could cry when I think about Marv. Marv and I were friends for many years, and his girlfriend, Nancy Peterson, is one of my closest friends. And he met Nancy Peterson at the Kaplan's. And Marv just loved to sit and talk at coffee shops, and I would just be enthralled by Marv, because Marv had a mind and a way of thinking that nobody else had, that I ever met in my life. And he was all over the place. He wasn't just at Dinkytown, but he envisioned the whole idea of what Dinkytown was like. He was a radical. He wanted to change the world. He was against the war. He lived his life the way he wanted to. He was actually very loving, and a lot of the people that he protested against were his friends on a kind of a personal level, which is kind of ironic. He knew how to connect with people, and he was a great teacher and a great humanitarian.
You've alluded to it in that answer, but maybe you can be a little more specific. How would you describe his impact on you specifically, especially now as you look back on your activism with social justice and matters like that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I was a math major in college, and my first professional job was at Honeywell as a computer programmer when computers were as large as rooms. And I had a twinge of regret taking that job, even though it was a great opportunity for me, because I knew that Marv was going after Honeywell for their producing bombs that were used in Vietnam and other places. And one time, my cousin and I were at a coffee shop, and we were talking about Marv Davidov, and pretty soon FBI agent came and interviewed my cousin, who also worked at Honeywell. So that was kind of an interesting sideline, but Marv helped me realize that we can't run the world the way the Honeywell was running their business at the time. We have to have moral standards in our business, and I think Marv helped a lot of people come to those conclusions. It's not all about the money. It's about how we can be helpful to people rather than how we can make the big bucks.
Describe the impact of and the interaction with the high school students from Marshall University High.
Well, I didn't have a lot of interaction with them, but one of my closest friends later on was a guy named Paul Davies, who died quite young, but he had been a Marshall U graduate, and so through him I met a lot of Marshall High people, and they were all like very interesting, very dynamic people. And then one of the ways I got involved in the protest against the Red Barn was that I became friends with some of the students at the time who were younger, a little bit younger than I was, but we had kind of a social interaction, and so that's how I got over there and put my body on the line to protest.